The steel door opens with a sound like a bone breaking. It is 3 a.m. in Nuremberg, April 1946, and Captain Robert Thompson has been awake for 36 hours. He is standing in a former SS administrative building that still smells of leather and cheap cologne and something else. Something underneath both. Something that might be fear baked into the walls. The safe in front of him was opened 10 minutes ago by a German locksmith who refused to look inside and left without saying a word. Now Thompson stands alone with whatever is in there. He reaches in slowly. His fingers touch cold metal first. A Walther PPK pistol, standard SS issue. He sets it on the desk. Next comes a photograph in a silver frame. A family. Blonde woman, 3 children, all smiles, standing in front of a cottage somewhere in what used to be Poland. The man in the photograph is Oberfuhrer Friedrich Schmidt, the previous occupant of this office. He is grinning, his arm around his wife, his children at his feet. Behind them, visible in the distance, is a row of identical cottages stretching to the horizon. A settlement, a colony, a little piece of Germany carved into someone else's country. Thompson puts the photograph face down on the desk. He does not want to look at those smiling children right now. Underneath the photograph is a stack of manila folders tied with white string. The top folder is thicker than the others. The label on it is typed, not handwritten, which means it was officially filed, officially catalogued, officially part of the record. It reads, General Plan Ost, Stand, Juni 1942. General Plan East. Status, June 1942. Thompson unties the string and opens the folder. What he sees makes no sense at first. He is expecting orders, directives, the language of murder that he has read in 100 other captured documents. Instead, he is looking at charts, graphs, tables of numbers arranged in neat columns, population density maps with color-coded zones. Agricultural yield projections for the next 50 years, calorie intake calculations per person per day in various regions of the Soviet Union. It looks like the annual report of a farming cooperative. It looks like homework. He flips through the pages slowly. Page 3. Resettlement, timetable for the general government region. Page 7. Projected Germanization of urban centers in Ukraine. Page 12. Food supply balances. Expected. Surplus. After removal of indigenous populations. Page 14. Transportation logistics for population transfer east of the Urals. The language is clinical. The word evacuation appears frequently. So does natural reduction. So does attrition. Nowhere does the document say kill. Nowhere does it say murder. It says remove. It says relocate. It says redistribute. It says manage. Thompson has been a lawyer since 1938. He knows how to read documents. He knows how to find the truth hidden between the lines. But this document does not hide anything. The truth is right there, in plain sight, written in the clean, precise language of men who believed they were doing nothing wrong. He finds a map of European Russia. It is divided into colored zones. Blue zones are marked immediate settlement areas for ethnic Germans being brought from the Baltic states, from Romania, from the Sudetenland. Green zones are future settlement areas to be cleared within 10 years. Gray zones are marked with a single word, Verwaltung, administration. But below that word, in smaller print, is a phrase that makes Thompson stop breathing for a moment. Verwaltung durch natürliche Reduktion der einheimischen Bevölkerung. Administration through natural reduction of the indigenous population. Natural reduction. Thompson reads the phrase again. He thinks about what it means in practice. It means no schools, no hospitals, no food shipments in winter, no cities to return to after the harvest fails. It means pushing people east, beyond the Urals, into swamps and forests, where the ground freezes solid for 6 months and nothing grows. It means letting geography do what soldiers might hesitate to do. It means death by neglect, calculated and approved in advance. He turns the page and finds a table titled Projected Population Changes in Major Urban Centers. The cities are listed in alphabetical order: Kiev, Leningrad, Minsk, Moscow, Odessa, Smolensk, Warsaw. Next to each city is the current population figure, as of 1941. Next to that is the projected population figure, after Germanization is complete. The numbers are not reductions, they are cancellations. Moscow, 3.8 million current, projected, 200,000. Leningrad, 2.5 million current, projected, 150,000. Kiev, 900,000 current, projected, 80,000. Smolensk, 150,000 current, projected, 15,000. Thompson stares at Smolensk, 15,000. The number is so specific. Someone sat in this office, or an office like it, and calculated that Smolensk should have exactly 15,000 people after the war, not 14,000, not 16,000, 15. Because 15,000 was the right number, the efficient number, the number that made the math work. He wonders who made that calculation. What kind of man sits down with a pencil and a cup of coffee and decides that a city of 150,000 people should be reduced to 15,000? What does he tell his wife at dinner? What does he tell his children when they ask what Daddy did at work today? Thompson flips back to the front of the folder. He finds the title page. Under the main title, in smaller type, is the name of the organization that produced the plan. Hauptabteilung, Planung und Boden. Main Department for Planning and Soil. And under that, the name of the department head, Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer. Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer. Thompson writes the name on a scrap of paper. He will remember it. He will remember it for the rest of his life. The door opens behind him. Lieutenant James Miller comes in, carrying 2 cups of bad army coffee. He sees Thompson's face and stops. "What is it?" Thompson does not answer immediately. He is still looking at the name. Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer. He imagines a man in a tweed jacket, standing at a lectern, drawing diagrams on a chalkboard for his students. He imagines the students taking notes, learning how to plan land use, learning how to calculate optimal population density, learning how to build a better future for the German people. He imagines them never knowing that their professor's diagrams are drawn in blood. "It's a blueprint," Thompson finally says, "for everything." He hands Miller the folder. Miller takes it and starts reading. His face changes as he reads. The color drains slowly. By the time he reaches the map with the gray zones, he looks like he might be sick. This is millions of people," Thompson nods. He has already done the math in his head. The low estimates in the document add up to 30 million. The high estimates, the ones marked, if necessary, go to 45 million. 45 million human beings, more than the entire population of France, more than the population of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland combined. Every single person in the British Isles, gone. But the number is too big to feel. It is abstract. What Thompson feels is not the number. What he feels is the specificness of Smolensk, the 15,000, the careful calculation. The cold, precise academic certainty that 135,000 people in a particular city have no right to exist. Miller sets the folder down carefully, as if it might break. Who wrote this? Thompson points to the name. Konrad Meyer, professor, agricultural expert. Probably has a nice house somewhere. Probably goes to church on Sundays. Miller looks at the name. Is he on any of the arrest lists? Thompson laughs. It is not a happy laugh. It is the laugh of a man who has been in Nuremberg long enough to understand how justice works in the aftermath of catastrophe. He's not a war criminal, Miller. He's an academic. He gave advice. He made recommendations. He never killed anyone. That's what his lawyers will say. That's what he'll say. And he'll be right. He never pulled a trigger. He never gave an order to shoot. He just drew maps and calculated calories and wrote reports. And 30 million people were going to die because of his maps. Thompson walks to the window. Outside, Nuremberg is dark. The street lights are still not working in most of the city. In the distance, he can see the Palace of Justice, where the main trial is happening. Floodlights illuminate the building. It looks like a movie set. Inside, the famous Nazis are answering for their crimes. Göring, Hess, Ribbentrop, the men with the fancy uniforms and the dramatic speeches, the men who looked good in photographs. But the men who wrote this document, Thompson thinks, are not in that building. They are in their homes. They are in their universities. They are applying for teaching positions. They are writing letters of recommendation for former colleagues. They are waiting for the world to forget. He turns back to the safe. There is more inside, more folders, more plans, more careful calculations. He pulls out the next one. It is thinner. The label says, Earn G dollars. Rung situation in den besetzten Ostgebieten. Food situation in the occupied Eastern Territories. He opens it. Page 1 begins with a simple statement. The food supply for the German army and the German population must come from the Eastern Territories. This requires that the indigenous population reduce its consumption. A reduction of 30 to 40% in caloric intake for non-Germans is achievable without significant short-term mortality. But longer-term projections indicate a population decrease of approximately 20 to 30 million is unavoidable if German nutritional standards are to be maintained. Unavoidable, Thompson reads the word again. Not chosen, not decided, unavoidable, as if hunger were a force of nature, like gravity or weather. As if 30 million deaths were just something that happened, not something that was planned, calculated, approved, and implemented by human beings with human hands and human brains and human consciences. He thinks about the men who wrote these words. They probably had lunch breaks. They probably complained about the coffee. They probably went home at 5 o'clock and played with their children and read bedtime stories and thought of themselves as good fathers, good Germans, good people doing important work for their country. He closes the folder and places it on top of the others. Then he picks up the photograph of Oberfuhrer Schmidt's family. He looks at the children, the blonde hair, the healthy faces, the smiles. They are probably still alive somewhere. They probably still think their father was a good man who did his duty. Thompson puts the photograph back in the safe. He does not know what else to do with it. He does not know what to do with any of this. Miller is still standing by the desk, holding the folder like it might burn him. What do we do now? Thompson looks at the stack of folders. He looks at the open safe. He looks at the name on the title page again. Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer. "We take it to the prosecutors," he says, "and we hope they understand what they're looking at." But even as he says it, he knows. The prosecutors are focused on the men in the courtroom, the men with blood on their hands, the men who gave the orders. They are not interested in professors. They are not interested in agricultural experts. They are not interested in men who killed with pencils instead of pistols. Thompson gathers the folders into a single stack. He ties them with the same white string that held them before. He carries them toward the door. At the threshold, he stops and looks back at the safe. It is empty now. The pistol is on the desk. The photograph is face down. The folders are gone, but the numbers are not gone. The numbers are in his head. The numbers are in the world. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. The cold, precise, academic certainty that whole peoples can be erased if the math works out. He steps into the hallway and closes the door behind him. The sound echoes through the empty building. Somewhere, a typewriter clatters. Somewhere, a guard coughs. Somewhere, in a university town in what used to be Germany, a professor named Konrad Meyer is probably sleeping peacefully, dreaming of his next lecture, convinced that he has done nothing wrong. And Thompson walks toward the Palace of Justice, carrying the blueprint for the murder of continents, wondering if anyone will ever be held accountable for the crimes committed with clean hands and sharp pencils. The train arrives in Berlin at 7 in the morning on May 2nd, 1941. It is a military transport, crammed with soldiers heading east. But in one compartment, separate from the others, sits a civilian. He is 53 years old, wearing a well-tailored suit that has seen better days. His name is Herbert Backe, and he is about to change the world in a way that will leave no statues in his honor. Backe is not a soldier. He is not a party ideologue. He is an agricultural expert, a specialist in food production, a man who has spent his entire adult life thinking about wheat and potatoes and cattle and the complex mathematics of feeding large populations. Before the war, he was a professor. Now he is state secretary in the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, which means he is responsible for making sure Germany does not starve while it fights a war on multiple fronts. The train stops. Backe steps onto the platform. He is met by an SS officer who drives him not to the ministry, not to his office, but to a conference room in the building of the 4-year plan, a massive complex where the German economy is being reorganized for war. Inside the conference room, waiting for him, are 20 men, generals, SS leaders, economic planners, and one empty chair at the head of the table, reserved for Hermann Göring, who will arrive late if he arrives at all. Backe takes his seat. He opens a leather portfolio and removes a document he has been working on for months. It has no official title yet, but in his notes he calls it Economic Policy Guidelines for the Eastern Territories. Others will later call it the Hunger Plan. Backe himself never uses that term. He prefers food supply management. The meeting begins. Göring arrives 20 minutes late, sweating, wearing a hunting outfit instead of a uniform. He waves impatiently at Backe. Get on with it. Backe stands. He walks to a large map of the Soviet Union that covers an entire wall. He picks up a pointer and begins to speak in a calm, measured voice, the voice of a lecturer addressing his students. Gentlemen, we are facing a fundamental problem. The German army will soon invade the Soviet Union. That army consists of 3 million men. They must be fed. In addition, the German population at home must be fed. Our own food production is insufficient. We have lost access to many of our previous sources. The British blockade continues. Where will the food come from? He pauses. The men at the table are silent. They know the answer, or think they do. From Russia. From the rich black soil of Ukraine. From the grain fields that have fed Europe for centuries. Backy continues. The Soviet Union produces food. Yes. But the Soviet Union also consumes food. 170 million people consume food. If we take the food we need, someone else will not get it. This is not a political question. This is arithmetic. He taps the map with his pointer. The tap lands on a line that runs roughly from Leningrad in the north to the Black Sea in the south. It is not a border. It is not a front line. It is a line he has drawn himself. North of this line, Baca says, is the forest zone. The land is poor. The soil is thin. The region cannot feed itself even in normal years. It depends on food imported from the south, from Ukraine, from the Black Earth regions. South of this line is the surplus zone, the grain, the meat, the vegetables, the food we need. He pauses again. The men at the table lean forward. They sense that something important is coming. Now consider our military situation. The army will advance. It will occupy territory. It will control the surplus zone. The food there will become ours. That is simple. But what about the north? What about the people living in the forest zone? What about the cities? What about Leningrad? What about Moscow? What about the millions of Soviet civilians who have always depended on food from the south? Baca sets down the pointer. He looks directly at the men at the table. They will no longer receive that food. The supply lines will be cut. The trains that once carried grain north will carry military supplies instead. The food that once fed Soviet cities will feed German soldiers. This is not a choice. This is necessity. The war must be won. The army must be fed. The German people must not starve. A general at the table raises a hand. How many are we talking about? Baca has prepared for this question. He opens his portfolio and reads from a sheet of paper. The population of the northern zone, including the cities, is approximately 60 to 70 million. They require, at minimum, basic subsistence. Without food imports from the south, that subsistence is impossible. The natural result will be a rapid decline in population. Our calculations suggest that within the first winter, between 20 and 30 million people will die. The rest will flee east, beyond the Urals, or they will survive in greatly reduced numbers in areas we do not control. The room is silent. 20 million, 30 million. The numbers hang in the air like smoke. Backy continues, his voice unchanged. This is not a tragedy we can avoid. It is a mathematical certainty. If we feed the German army and the German people, we cannot feed the Soviet population north of this line. The two objectives are mutually exclusive. We have chosen our objective. The consequences are unavoidable. Unavoidable. The word again. The same word that will appear in 100 documents, 1,000 memos, 10,000 bureaucratic justifications over the next 4 years. Unavoidable. As if the deaths were an act of God, not an act of policy. As if the men in this room were merely observing nature, not commanding it. Goering speaks for the first time. Good. Let them starve. That's why we have to do this, isn't it? The Russian has been starving for centuries. He's used to it. Laughter around the table. Nervous laughter mostly, but laughter nonetheless. Baca does not laugh. He waits for the laughter to stop and then continues his presentation. There are implementation details to consider, he says. The Army must understand that food from the occupied territories is not to be shared with the local population. The local population must be pushed out of the surplus zones. The cities in the north must be surrounded and starved into submission. Leningrad, in particular, must be treated as a military objective of the highest priority. If we can take Leningrad quickly, we can capture its population. If we cannot take it quickly, we will surround it and let hunger do the work. He flips to another page in his portfolio. I have prepared specific guidelines for military commanders. They will receive instructions on how to manage food supplies in occupied areas. The basic principle is simple. German needs come first. Local populations will receive rations only if and when surplus exists. In most areas, no surplus will exist. The meeting continues for another hour. Logistics are discussed. Transport routes, storage facilities, coordination with the SS, coordination with the economic staffs that will follow the army into the Soviet Union. By the time the meeting ends, the plan is no longer a theory. It is a directive. It will be issued within weeks. It will be implemented within months. And within a year, the first millions will be dead. But Baca does not think of it that way. He thinks of it as management, as planning, as the hard but necessary work of feeding a nation at war. He goes home that night to his wife and children. He eats dinner. He reads bedtime stories. He sleeps peacefully. In the months that follow, the plan unfolds exactly as Baca predicted. The army advances. The food supplies are seized. The cities are surrounded. Leningrad is cut off. Within its borders, nearly 1 million people will die of starvation before the siege ends. Not from bullets, not from bombs, from hunger, carefully calculated, deliberately imposed, maintained for 872 days as a matter of policy. In the countryside, the pattern repeats. Villages are stripped of grain. Farmers are left with nothing to plant for the next season. Children begin to swell from hunger. Old people die first, then the sick, then the weak, then anyone who cannot find food. The German authorities do nothing to stop it. In many cases, they actively prevent relief. Food is for Germans. The rest will manage or die. And in Berlin, Baca continues his work. He revises his calculations. He updates his projections. He attends more meetings. He presents more reports. He is promoted. He becomes Minister of Food and Agriculture in 1944, one of the most powerful men in the Reich. He never visits the Eastern Territories. He never sees a starving child. He never smells the dead. He sits in his office with his charts and his graphs and his numbers, and he manages the food supply. In April 1945, with the Red Army approaching Berlin, Herbert Baca puts on his best suit and walks into his office for the last time. He writes a letter to his wife. He apologizes for the things he has done, but only in general terms. He does not mention the 20 million. He does not mention Leningrad. He does not mention the children who died, because he drew a line on a map and called it unavoidable. Then he goes into the bathroom and hangs himself. The Americans find his body when they take the building. They also find his files. Thousands of pages of calculations, projections, reports, and directives. The blueprint for the hunger plan. The mathematical proof that 20 to 30 million deaths were not an accident of war, but a deliberate policy, approved at the highest levels, implemented with bureaucratic efficiency, and justified by the cold logic of arithmetic. One of the American officers who finds the files is a young intelligence officer named Thompson. He is not yet Captain Thompson. He is not yet in Nuremberg. He is just a man standing in a dead man's office, holding a dead man's papers, trying to understand how a civilized country could do this to itself and to others. He reads Baca's final report, dated March 1945. In it, Baca reviews the food situation in the occupied territories and concludes that the policy has been successful. The German army was fed. The German people did not starve. The objectives were met. The fact that millions of others died is mentioned only in passing, as a statistical footnote, a cost of doing business. Thompson puts the report down. He looks at the body in the bathroom, the rope still around the neck, the face purple and swollen. He feels nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just a cold, empty recognition that this man, this Herbert Back, probably thought of himself as a good German doing his duty until the very end. He walks out of the office and into the ruined streets of Berlin. The war is over. The hunger plan is finished. But the numbers remain. 20 million. 30 million. The dead have no names in Baca's files. They are just statistics. Reductions. Adjustments. The unavoidable consequences of arithmetic. And somewhere, in a university town in what used to be Germany, a professor named Konrad Meyer is already revising his own plans, preparing for the day when he will be asked to explain his work to men like Thompson, preparing the arguments that will keep him out of prison and allow him to live out his life in comfort and respect, convinced to his dying day that he never killed anyone, that he was just an academic, just a planner, just a man who drew lines on maps and let the math do the rest. The office is on the second floor of a handsome building on Unter den Linden, in the heart of Berlin, not far from the university where Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer has taught since 1934. The building survived the war. Meyer's office survived. And Meyer himself, in the spring of 1946, is still alive, still healthy, still waiting for someone to knock on his door. He is 55 years old. He has a wife and 4 children. He owns a house in a good neighborhood. Before the war, colleagues described him as ambitious but reasonable, a serious scholar, a man who took his work seriously but never seemed consumed by ideology. He published articles in respected journals. He spoke at conferences. He advised the government on agricultural policy. He was, by any measure, a successful academic on a comfortable trajectory toward emeritus status. But the file that Captain Robert Thompson carries with him everywhere now tells a different story. Thompson has read every page of the General Plan Ost. He has memorized Meyer's name. He has tracked Meyer's career. He has learned things that Meyer probably hopes no one will ever learn. Konrad Meyer was born in 1901 in a small town in Lower Saxony. His father was a teacher. His mother died when he was young. He studied agriculture at the University of Göttingen, one of the best in Germany, and earned his doctorate in 1925 with a dissertation on crop rotation patterns in northern Germany. He was 24 years old. Already, the pattern was set. Meyer was a man who thought in systems, who saw the world as something to be organized, optimized, improved. He joined the Nazi Party in 1932, before Hitler came to power. This was not unusual for ambitious academics. The party offered opportunities, connections, a way to turn scholarship into influence. Meyer rose quickly. In 1934, he was appointed to a professorship at the University of Berlin. In 1935, he joined the SS. His membership number was 274142. He was not a stormtrooper, not a street fighter. He was an academic in uniform, a man whose rank would open doors. By 1939, Meyer was running the Planning Office for Land Use within the SS main office. His job was to think about the future. What would Germany look like after the war? How would the newly conquered territories be organized? Where would settlers come from? How would populations be managed? These were not military questions. They were planning questions. They were questions for someone who understood maps and demographics and agricultural carrying capacity. Meyer threw himself into the work with enthusiasm. He assembled a team of experts, geographers, economists, demographers, agricultural specialists. They met regularly in comfortable offices with good coffee and plenty of paper. They drew maps. They calculated numbers. They debated the optimal density of German settlement in different regions. They were building the future, and the future was beautiful. The first version of the General Plan Ost was completed in 1941. Meyer presented it to Heinrich Himmler personally. Himmler was impressed. He told Meyer to keep working to refine the plan to make it bigger, bolder, more comprehensive. Meyer did exactly what he was told. The 1942 revision, the one Thomson found in Oberfuhrer Schmidt's safe, was Meyer's masterpiece. It was 200 pages of detailed analysis. It covered every aspect of the colonization of Eastern Europe and the Western Soviet Union. It identified which regions would be settled first. It calculated how many Germans would be needed. It projected population changes over 50 years. It addressed infrastructure, transportation, agricultural development, urban planning. It was, in its way, a work of extraordinary scholarship. It was also a blueprint for the destruction of 30 million human beings. But Meyer never used words like destruction. He used words like resettlement and evacuation and depolonization and derussification. He wrote about racial evaluation of local populations, about separating people into categories based on their suitability for Germanization. Those deemed racially valuable could stay. They could become German. The rest would be moved east, beyond the Urals, into territory where they could live as they wished, as long as they stayed far away from German settlers. How many would be moved? Meyer calculated the numbers carefully. From Poland, 3 to 4 million. From the Baltic states, 1 to 2 million. From Ukraine, 10 to 15 million. From Western Russia, another 10 million. The total came to approximately 31 million people who would be relocated over a period of 25 years. And if they did not relocate? If they refused to leave their homes, their farms, their villages? Meyer's plan did not address that directly. It simply assumed that relocation would happen. The mechanisms were someone else's problem. Meyer was a planner, not an executor. He drew the maps. Other people would make the maps real. In his office on Unter den Linden, Meyer worked long hours. He received visitors. He attended meetings. He corresponded with colleagues throughout Germany. He was respected, admired, even feared in some circles because of his connections to Himmler and the SS. He was building something important. He was part of history. And when he went home at night, he was a husband and father. He helped his children with homework. He tended his garden. He read books. He listened to music. He was, by all accounts, a decent man in his private life. His neighbors liked him. His colleagues respected him. His students appreciated his clarity and his patience. This is the part that Thompson cannot reconcile. The man who drew the maps and the man who gardened on weekends are the same person. The man who calculated that Smolensk should have 15,000 people is the same man who read bedtime stories to his children. The man who planned the removal of 31 million human beings is the same man who helped his neighbors fix their fences. Thompson has spent months trying to understand this. He has interviewed dozens of Germans. He has read thousands of documents. He has stared at photographs of men like Meyer, men with clean hands and clear eyes, men who never hurt anyone personally, but whose work made murder possible on an industrial scale. And he still does not understand how they sleep at night. In March 1946, Thompson finally gets his chance to ask. Meyer has been located. He is living in his house in a Berlin suburb, waiting. He has not fled. He has not hidden. He has not changed his name. He is simply waiting, as if he believes that nothing will happen, that the world will recognize that he was just an academic doing academic work. Thompson goes to see him with 2 military police officers. It is a cold morning. The streets are still full of rubble. Meyer's house is intact, one of the few on its block that survived the bombing. Thompson knocks on the door. Meyer answers himself. He is wearing a cardigan. He looks tired but composed. He invites Thompson inside. They sit in the living room. There are books everywhere, family photographs on the mantel, a piano in the corner. It could be any professor's home anywhere in the world. Thompson takes out the folder. He places it on the coffee table. Meyer looks at it but does not reach for it. "Do you know what this is?" Thompson asks. Meyer nods. "The General Plan Ost. I wrote it." His voice is calm. No defiance, no guilt. Just the flat tone of a man stating a fact. Thompson waits for more. Meyer says nothing. "You wrote a plan to move 30 million people out of their homes," Thompson says. "To starve them, to let them die in Siberia." Meyer shakes his head slightly. "That is not what the plan says. The plan addresses resettlement. It addresses the organization of territory. It does not address mortality. Mortality is a function of many factors. The plan simply provides a framework." Thompson stares at him. "You're telling me you didn't know what would happen to those people? You didn't know they would die?" Meyer is silent for a long moment. Then he speaks, carefully, choosing his words like a man choosing investments. "I knew that resettlement would be difficult. I knew that some people would not survive the process. That is true of any large population movement in history. But my role was to plan the settlement, not to execute the removal. I am an academic. I provided data. Others made decisions based on that data. I cannot be responsible for every decision made by others." Thompson has heard this before. From Bacchus files, from a dozen other men he has interviewed. The same words, the same deflection, the same careful separation between planning and doing, between theory and practice, between the man with the pencil and the man with the gun. "You signed your name to this document," Thompson says. "You presented it to Himmler personally. You knew what the SS would do with your plans." Meyer shrugs, a small, almost imperceptible movement of his shoulders. "I knew that the SS would use my work. I did not control how they used it. I provided the best planning I could under the circumstances. If I had not done it, someone else would have. The settlement of the East was going to happen regardless. The only question was whether it would be planned well or planned poorly. Thompson feels something cold settle in his chest. It is not anger. It is something worse. It is the recognition that Meyer believes what he is saying. He genuinely believes that he is not responsible. He genuinely believes that planning is different from doing, that maps are different from murders, that the man who draws the line is not the man who pulls the trigger. 30 million people, Thompson says again. You planned for 30 million people to disappear. Meyer corrects him. I planned for 31 million people to be resettled. The distinction matters. Thompson stands up. He cannot sit in this room anymore. He cannot look at this man in his cardigan, with his books and his photographs and his piano, calmly explaining that 31 million resettlements are different from 30 million deaths. You will be arrested, Thompson says. You will be tried. Meyer nods. I understand. I have done nothing wrong, but I understand that the victors will want their trials. I will cooperate fully. I have nothing to hide. Thompson leaves. The military police stay behind to complete the arrest. Meyer goes quietly. He will spend the next year in various holding facilities, waiting for his day in court. He will write letters to his family. He will read books. He will prepare his defense. And when he finally stands before a judge, he will say exactly what he said to Thompson in his living room. He was an academic. He provided data. He planned. Others executed. The distinction matters. In the months that follow, Thompson will watch Meyer's trial from a distance. He will see Meyer's lawyers argue that the General Plan Ost was never implemented, that it was just a study, just a proposal, just a theoretical exercise. He will see Meyer himself take the stand and speak in his calm, measured voice about demographics and settlement patterns and agricultural carrying capacity. He will see the judges nod, taking notes, treating Meyer with the respect due to a professor. And when the verdict comes, Thompson will not be surprised. Meyer will be classified as a fellow traveler, not a criminal. He will be fined. He will be released. He will return to his university and his books and his piano. He will live another 20 years, writing articles, attending conferences, respected by his colleagues. He will never spend a day in prison. But that is still in the future. For now, Thompson walks away from Meyer's house through the rubble of Berlin. He thinks about the distinction Meyer made. Planning versus doing. Theory versus practice. The pencil versus the gun. He thinks about the dead. The millions of dead who never knew that a professor in Berlin was planning their removal, calculating their numbers, drawing lines on maps that would become boundaries between life and death. He thinks about the children in Meyer's photographs, the ones on the mantel. He wonders what they will be told about their father. He wonders if they will ever know that the man who taught them to ride bicycles and read books also planned the future of a continent, a future that included no room for 31 million people who happened to be born in the wrong place. And he keeps walking because there is nothing else to do. The war is over. The planners are going free. The distinction matters. That is what Meyer said. That is what Meyer believed. And maybe in some strange way Meyer was right. The distinction does matter. It matters because it allows men like Meyer to sleep at night. It matters because it allows men like Meyer to look at themselves in the mirror and see not murderers, but academics, not killers, but planners, not monsters, but men. the distinction matters. And that, Thompson realizes, is the most terrifying thing of all. The village is called Bolshaya Rosoka. It sits on a small river in western Russia, about 200 kilometers from Smolensk, in the heart of the gray zone on Meyer's maps. Before the war, it had 400 people. By the spring of 1943, it has fewer than 200. By the end of the year, it will have none at all. The story of Bolshaya Rosoka is not written in any official document. No statistician recorded the names. No planner calculated the individual fates. But the people who lived there, who died there, who disappeared from there, are the reason the documents exist. They are the numbers in the columns. They are the surplus population. They are the unavoidable cost. Ivan Petrovich was born in Bolshaya Rosoka in 1898. He lived his whole life in the same wooden house his father built, the same house his grandfather built before that. He married a girl from the next village. They had 5 children, but 2 died in infancy, which was normal, which was expected, which was the way of things. The 3 who survived were Anna, born 1927, Mikhail, born 1930, and little Katya, born 1935, the baby, the one Ivan Petrovich loved most of all because she had his mother's eyes. In June 1941, the war came. Ivan Petrovich heard it on the radio, the crackling voice of Molotov announcing that German forces had attacked. He did not know where Germany was exactly. He knew it was far away, somewhere west, somewhere beyond the places he had never seen. He thought the war would stay far away. He was wrong. The Germans arrived in October. They came in trucks and motorcycles, dust rising behind them, their uniforms clean and pressed, their faces hard and impersonal. They set up a headquarters in the village school. They posted notices on the walls. They demanded food, livestock, warm clothing. Ivan Petrovich gave them his best cow, the one that gave the most milk. He gave them his warmest coat, the one his wife had made for him before she died. He gave because there was no choice. The soldiers had guns. The soldiers used them. For the first few months, life continued in a strange, suspended way. The Germans took what they wanted, but they left the village standing. People still worked the land, what little they could. Children still played in the streets, though more quietly now, more cautiously. Ivan Petrovich still woke each morning and drank tea and looked at his children and thanked God they were alive. He did not know that in Berlin, in an office on Unter den Linden, Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer was drawing lines on maps. He did not know that Bolshaya Rosoka fell within a zone marked for special treatment. He did not know that his village, his home, his family had been classified as surplus. The first sign came in January 1942. A German officer arrived with a clipboard and an interpreter. He went house to house. He asked questions. How many people live here? How old are they? What work do they do? Can they read? Can they write? Are they healthy? Are they sick? Are they useful? Ivan Petrovich answered as best he could. He was 43 years old. He was a farmer. He could not read. He was healthy. His children were healthy. The officer wrote everything down. He did not smile. He did not explain why he was asking. The second sign came in March. The food rations stopped. For months, the Germans had distributed small amounts of bread and salt to those who worked for them. Now the distribution ended. The officer with the clipboard returned. He explained through the interpreter that the village was no longer a priority. The army needed food. The German people needed food. The people of Bolshaya Rosoka would have to find their own. Ivan Petrovich did not understand. Find their own where? The fields were empty. The previous year's harvest had been taken. The few animals that remained were too weak to slaughter. There was nothing. He asked the interpreter what they were supposed to do. The interpreter shrugged. He was a local man, pressed into service. He looked away when he answered. "Survive," he said. "Or don't. It makes no difference to them." By April, people were hungry. Not the hunger of missed meals, the hunger Ivan Petrovich had known before, during hard times. This was different. This was the hunger that eats you from inside, that hollows you out, that makes you weak and dizzy and desperate. Children cried at night. Old people stopped leaving their houses. Some died quietly, and there was no strength to bury them properly. Ivan Petrovich watched his daughter Katya grow thin. She was 7 years old. She had always been small, but now she was disappearing, her face sharpening, her eyes growing too large for their sockets. She stopped playing. She stopped talking. She lay on the bed most days, wrapped in whatever blankets remained, waiting for food that did not come. He tried everything. He walked to the next village, 10 kilometers away, to ask for help. They had nothing either. He walked to the German headquarters, to beg. The soldiers chased him away. He tried to hunt in the forest, but the forest had been picked clean. Every rabbit, every squirrel, every living thing that could be eaten. He tried to dig for roots, but the ground was still frozen. He tried to boil water and call it soup. It was not soup, it was water. In May, Mikhail got sick. He was 12, strong for his age, but hunger had weakened him. A simple cold became something worse. He coughed, and then he could not stop coughing. And then there was blood on his lips. And then he was gone. Ivan Petrovich buried him behind the house, in the place where the sun hit, first in the morning. He did not have the strength to dig a proper grave. He did not have the strength to cry. Anna tried to help. She was 15, almost a woman, and she had heard things. She had heard that German soldiers sometimes gave food to girls who were willing to do things. She did not tell her father what she was planning. She just washed her face, put on her best dress, and walked to the headquarters. She came back 3 hours later. She had bread in her hands. She did not speak. She gave the bread to her father and went to the corner of the house and sat with her back to the wall and stared at nothing. Ivan Petrovich did not ask what happened. He did not want to know. He took the bread and fed it to Katya, a little at a time, watching her chew, watching her swallow, watching life return to her eyes for a few hours. Anna went back the next day, and the next and the next. Each time she brought bread, each time she came back silent and empty. Ivan Petrovich told himself it was necessary. Katya was alive because of it. That was what mattered. That was all that mattered. In June, the Germans announced that the village would be cleared. Everyone must leave. They would be transported east to new settlements, to better land. It was for their own good. The officer with the clipboard explained this with a straight face. The interpreter translated. No one believed it, but no one could refuse. The transport was a train of cattle cars. They were packed in, standing room only, no food, no water, no toilets. The journey lasted 2 weeks. People died standing up, and there was no room to lay them down. Children died in their mothers' arms. Old people died leaning against the walls. The smell was indescribable. Ivan Petrovich held Katya the whole time. He held her and talked to her and told her stories about the old days, about her grandmother, about the cow they used to have, about anything that might keep her alive. She grew weaker and weaker. Her eyes stayed open, but they did not see. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. On the 11th day, she died. She died in his arms, in the dark, in the stench, in the rolling rattle of the train. Ivan Petrovich held her for a long time after she stopped breathing. He held her because there was nothing else to hold. He held her because letting go meant admitting she was gone. Anna died the next day. She had been sick for a while, sick in a way that had nothing to do with hunger, sick in a way that started after her visits to the German headquarters. Ivan Petrovich did not know what disease she had. He only knew that she stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being there. He held her too for a while, until the train lurched and her body slid away from him into the mass of other bodies. When the train finally stopped, somewhere east of the Urals, somewhere in the vast emptiness where the planners had decided surplus people should go, Ivan Petrovich was alone. He stepped out of the car into sunlight, so bright it hurt. He looked around at the other survivors, the ones who had made it, the ones who would now try to build something in a place with no houses, no food, no hope. He did not try. He sat down on the ground and did not get up. He sat there for 3 days, not eating, not drinking, not moving, except to blink. On the 4th day, a guard came and poked him with a rifle. Ivan Petrovich did not respond. The guard shrugged and walked away. On the 5th day, Ivan Petrovich stopped blinking. The camp authorities recorded his death as natural causes. They recorded Katya's death the same way. They recorded Anna's death the same way. In the columns of statistics that Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer would later review, the Petrovich family would appear as 3 numbers: 3 units of population reduction, 3 unavoidable costs of resettlement. No one asked their names. No one recorded their story. No one knew that Ivan Petrovich had once been a farmer who loved his daughters, that Anna had sacrificed everything to keep her sister alive, that Katya had died in her father's arms on a train going nowhere. They were just numbers. They were just surplus. In Berlin, in his comfortable office, Meyer continued his work. He received updates from the Eastern Territories, population figures, resettlement statistics, mortality rates. He reviewed them carefully, adjusting his projections, refining his models. The numbers were within expected parameters. The plan was working. He did not think about Ivan Petrovich. He did not know Ivan Petrovich existed. He did not know about Anna or Katya or Mikhail. He did not know about the train or the hunger or the dying children. He knew only the numbers. The numbers were clean. The numbers were manageable. The numbers told him that the future was proceeding according to plan. And somewhere in the vastness of Russia, in a place that did not appear on Meyer's maps, the bodies of the Petrovich family lay in unmarked ground. No one came to visit. No one came to mourn. No one remembered their names. They had been classified as surplus. And surplus, by definition, is forgotten. But the numbers remain. In the files that Captain Thompson will find 3 years later, in the safe of Oberfuhrer Schmidt, in the documents of Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer, the numbers are there. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. And somewhere in those numbers, hidden in the columns and the totals, are Ivan and Anna and Mikhail and Katya. They have no names in the files. They have no stories in the statistics. But they are there. They are always there. The train station in Minsk is crowded on the morning of October 15th, 1943. Crowded with people who do not want to be there. Crowded with families carrying whatever they could grab in the final minutes before the soldiers came. Crowded with children who do not understand why they are leaving their homes. Crowded with old people who understand all too well. They are being loaded onto cattle cars. Not Jews this time, not political prisoners, just ordinary people from the villages around Minsk, farmers and their families, people who happen to live in a zone that Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer, sitting in his comfortable office in Berlin, had designated for clearing. The word appears in his documents: Freimachung, clearing, making free, making empty, making ready for German settlers who will arrive after the war. Obersturmbannführer Erich Körner is in charge of this operation. He is 38 years old, a career SS officer who joined the party in 1933, who has spent the last 2 years in the East, who has learned to stop seeing the people he loads onto trains as people. They are numbers. They are quotas. They are units to be processed efficiently. He stands on the platform with a clipboard, checking off names, marking each car as it fills. He has read the documents from Berlin. He knows the plan. These people are being evacuated to make room for German settlers. They will be taken east, beyond the Urals, to territory that Germany does not control. Territory where they will have to survive on their own. Körner knows what that means. He knows that most of them will not survive. But that is not his concern. His concern is the loading. His concern is the timetable. His concern is making the numbers work. Car number 7 is taking longer than expected. KGP Arner walks over to investigate. A woman is refusing to board. She is maybe 30 years old, holding a small child in her arms, with 2 more clinging to her skirt. She is screaming in Russian, screaming words KG Poirner does not understand, but recognizes anyway. The same words he has heard 100 times. Why? Where are you taking us? What have we done? A Ukrainian auxiliary, working for the Germans, tries to push her toward the car. She fights back, she kicks, she bites. The auxiliary hits her across the face with his rifle butt. She falls, still holding the child. Blood runs from her mouth. The child starts crying. The other 2 children scream. The auxiliary grabs her by the hair and drags her toward the car. Körner watches. He does not intervene. This is not his job. His job is the numbers. The woman gets on the train. The car fills. The doors slide shut and are bolted from the outside. Inside, in the darkness, in the stench, the woman holds her children and wonders what comes next. She does not know that what comes next is nothing. She does not know that her name, her face, her story will never be recorded anywhere except in the memories of the few who survive. The train pulls out of the station. Körner makes a note on his clipboard. Car 7, 48 persons. He does not write down their names. He does not write down the woman's name or her children's names or anything about them except the number. 48. The number is clean. The number is efficient. The number goes into the column marked evacuated. 300 kilometers away, in a village called Katyn, something else is happening. It is March 22, 1943. The village is surrounded by SS soldiers. The inhabitants, mostly old men, women, and children, have been dragged from their houses and gathered in a large barn on the edge of the village. There are 156 of them. They do not know why they are here. They do not know what they have done. The reason they will never learn is that partisans attacked a German convoy nearby earlier that day. The partisans escaped. The SS, unable to find them, decided to punish someone else, someone local, someone who might have helped, or might have known something, or might simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The village of Katyn was chosen at random. It could have been any village. It happened to be this one. The barn doors are closed. Soldiers pile straw around the outside. They pour gasoline on the straw. An officer lights a match. The straw catches. The flames spread. Inside the barn, the screaming begins. It goes on for hours. The barn burns. The people inside burn. Some try to break through the walls. Soldiers shoot them. Some try to escape through the roof. Soldiers shoot them too. By the time the fire dies down, all 156 are dead. The youngest was 7 weeks old. The oldest was 73 years old. The soldiers take photographs. They do this sometimes, as souvenirs, as proof of a job well done. The photographs show the burning barn, the bodies piled outside afterward, the smiling faces of the men who did the work. In one photograph, a soldier holds up a baby's shoe. He is laughing. The village of Katyn never appears in any version of the General Plan Ost. It was too small, too insignificant. It was not on any map that Meyer drew. But the people of Katyn died because of the plan anyway. They died because the plan created a world in which their lives had no value. They died because the plan classified people like them as surplus, as obstacles, as problems to be solved. They died because the men with pencils made it possible for the men with matches to do their work without guilt. In Berlin, Meyer continues his work. He receives reports from the East, population movements, resettlement statistics, mortality figures. He reads them carefully. The numbers are within projections. The plan is working. He does not know about Katyn. He does not know about the burning barn, or the screaming children, or the soldier with the baby shoe. He knows only the numbers. The numbers are clean. The numbers are manageable. The numbers tell him that the future is proceeding according to plan. In the summer of 1943, the German army begins to retreat. The tide of war has turned. The Soviets are advancing. The territories that Meyer planned to settle are being liberated. But the work continues. Even as the front line moves west, the evacuations continue. The killings continue. The starvation continues. In a village near Kiev, a German agricultural officer named Klaus Richter is implementing the food policies that Herbert Back designed 2 years earlier. Richter is not SS. He is not a soldier. He is an agronomist, a civilian specialist sent to manage food production in the occupied territories. He has a degree from the University of Bonn. He has a wife and children back in Germany. He considers himself a reasonable man. His job is to collect grain. The grain is needed for the army. The grain is needed for Germany. The grain is not needed for the locals. Richter has orders. The local population receives rations only after German needs are met. German needs are never fully met. Therefore, the locals receive nothing. Richter watches as the grain is loaded onto trains heading west. He watches as the villagers grow thinner, weaker, more desperate. He watches as children beg in the streets. He watches as old people die in their houses. He tells himself that this is war. He tells himself that he is just doing his job. He tells himself that the villagers would do the same if they were in his position. He does not know if this is true. He does not want to know. He focuses on the grain. The grain is his responsibility. The grain is what he was sent here to manage. The people are someone else's problem. In September, Richter receives a new order. The retreat is accelerating. The grain that cannot be transported must be destroyed. Burned. Dumped in rivers. Anything to keep it from falling into Soviet hands. Richter follows the order. He watches as thousands of tons of grain, enough to feed the entire region for months, go up in flames. He watches as the villagers, already starving, watch the smoke rise from their own fields. He does not meet their eyes. By the time Richter leaves Ukraine, in October 1943, the region around his village has lost half its population. Some were evacuated. Some were killed. Most starved. The survivors are the strong, the lucky, the ones who found a way to live when living seemed impossible. They will remember. They will remember the agronomist with the degree from Bonn, who watched them starve while grain burned. Richter returns to Germany. He resumes his life. He never speaks of what he saw. He tells himself that he did nothing wrong. He was just doing his job. The plan required it. The war required it. He was a small part of a large machine. The machine is responsible, not him. In early 1944, the Red Army crosses into Poland. The territories that Meyer planned to Germanize are now under Soviet control. The German settlers who were supposed to arrive after the war will never come. The villages that were cleared will be repopulated by survivors returning from the east. The trains that carried people to their deaths will carry soldiers to Berlin. But the work is not over. In the camps, in the ghettos, in the killing fields, the final phase of the plan continues. The SS, knowing they are losing, accelerates the murder rate. If they cannot keep the territories, they will leave nothing behind. No people, no witnesses, no one to remember. In Auschwitz, in Treblinka, in 100 other places, the killing continues until the very last moment. The planners in Berlin receive updates. The numbers are tallied. The statistics are filed. The dead become data. When the war finally ends, in May 1945, the survivors emerge. From the forests, from the camps, from the ruins of their villages. They are the ones who were supposed to die. They are the ones who were classified as surplus. They are the ones who proved the plan wrong by staying alive. But most did not stay alive. Most are gone. Most are numbers now. Numbers in columns. Statistics in files. Unavoidable costs of a plan that never happened. A plan that was just a study, just a proposal, just a theoretical exercise. In a village near Minsk, a woman stands in front of a burned-out house. She is the woman from the train station, the one who fought back, the one who was dragged onto car number 7. She survived. She does not know how. She does not know why. She only knows that she is standing where her home used to be, and her children are not with her. They died on the train. They died in the camp. They died somewhere, and she does not know where, and she does not know how to mourn without a grave. She looks at the ruins. She looks at the sky. She does not cry. She has no tears left. She simply stands and remembers and wonders if anyone in the world will ever know what happened here. In Berlin, in his comfortable house, Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer is preparing his defense. He is gathering documents. He is consulting with lawyers. He is writing statements that explain, carefully and calmly, that he was just an academic, just a planner, just a man who drew maps and calculated numbers. He never killed anyone. He never ordered anyone killed. The distinction matters. And somewhere, in the files that Captain Thompson will find, the numbers wait. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. The numbers do not speak. The numbers do not cry. The numbers simply are, and they will be there long after the planners are gone, long after the survivors have died, long after the world has forgotten the names of the villages and the people who lived in them. The numbers will remain, and they will tell the story that no one wants to hear. The year is 1947. The place is the internment camp number 6, near the small town of Esselheide in northern Germany. It is a former prisoner of war camp, now repurposed to hold former Nazis awaiting trial. The barbed wire is the same. The guard towers are the same. Only the occupants have changed. Professor Dr. Konrad Meyer has been here for 8 months. He shares a barracks with former SS officers, former party officials, former administrators of the occupied territories. Some of them are clearly guilty. They have tattoos under their arms, blood types, the mark of the Waffen-SS. They have numbers on their forearms from their own time in the camps. They are killers, and everyone knows it. Meyer is different. He is not a killer. He tells himself this every day. He tells his cellmates. He tells the interrogators who come to question him. He is an academic, a planner, a specialist in land use and agricultural development. He never hurt anyone. He never gave an order to kill. He just drew maps and calculated numbers. The distinction matters. The interrogators are not convinced. They have read the General Plan Ost. They have seen the maps with the gray zones. They have calculated the totals. 30 million, 45 million. They ask Meyer how an academic, a specialist in land use, could propose moving 30 million people without understanding what would happen to them. Meyer explains patiently. The plan was theoretical. It was a study, not an operational order. It was one of many proposals considered by the SS. It was never fully implemented. The people who died in the East died because of the war, because of military operations, because of circumstances beyond anyone's control. They did not die because of his maps. The interrogators ask about the food calculations, the calorie counts, the projections of natural reduction. Meyer explains that these were standard demographic tools. Any population resettlement involves some mortality. He was simply accounting for that reality. He was not advocating for death. He was planning for it, yes, but planning is not advocating. The distinction matters. The interrogators ask about his SS rank, his membership number, his meetings with Himmler. Meyer explains that many academics joined the SS. It was a professional organization, not just a military one. The SS had research divisions, planning divisions, cultural divisions. His membership was administrative, not operational. He never wore a uniform in the field. He never participated in any action. He sat at a desk. He drew maps. The distinction matters. In the summer of 1947, Meyer learns that he will be tried. Not at Nuremberg, where the major war criminals were hanged the previous year, but at a smaller proceeding, a denazification trial, run by German courts under Allied supervision. These trials are for the lesser figures, the bureaucrats, the fellow travelers. The penalties are usually fines, loss of property, temporary bans from public office. Prison time is rare. Meyer is relieved. A denazification trial means he will not hang. It means he will not spend the rest of his life in prison. It means he can explain himself to German judges. people who understand the context, people who know that the war created difficult circumstances, people who might be sympathetic to a fellow academic who was just doing his job. He hires a lawyer, a good one, a man named Dr. Ernst Achenbach, who defended several former Nazis and had a talent for turning perpetrators into victims. Achenbach reads the General Plan Ost carefully. He makes notes. He develops a strategy. The strategy is simple. Meyer was not a decision-maker. He was a technician. He provided data. Others made choices based on that data. He cannot be held responsible for how others used his work. This is like holding a mathematician responsible for how an engineer uses his formulas. It is absurd. It is unjust. The distinction matters. Achenbach also emphasizes that the plan was never fully implemented. It was a draft, a proposal, a study. Many plans were made during the war that never came to pass. Meyer cannot be blamed for what might have happened. He can only be judged for what did happen. And what did happen was the war, not his plan. The distinction matters. The trial begins in October 1947. Meyer wears a suit, not a uniform. He sits quietly, taking notes, looking scholarly. His family sits in the front row, his wife, his children. They are here to support him. They believe he is innocent. They believe he was just doing his job. The prosecutor presents the evidence, the General Plan Ost, the maps, the population figures, the calorie calculations, the projections of natural reduction. The prosecutor reads passages aloud, slowly, letting the words hang in the air. 31 million people to be resettled. The indigenous population to be reduced through natural attrition. Germanization within 20 years. The courtroom is silent. The judges take notes. Meyer's face shows no emotion. Meyer takes the stand in his own defense. He speaks calmly, clearly, like a professor lecturing students. He explains the context, the war, the need for planning, the uncertainty of all projections. He explains that his work was scientific, objective, based on the best available data. He explains that he never intended harm. He was serving his country, as any patriot would. He was doing his job. The prosecutor asks the question that matters. Did you know that your plan would result in the deaths of millions of people? Meyer pauses. He chooses his words carefully. I knew that resettlement would be difficult. I knew that some people would not survive. That is true of any large population movement in history. But I did not calculate deaths. I calculated population changes. The distinction is important. Deaths are one factor in population change. There are others: migration, assimilation, changes in birth rates. My plan addressed all of these factors. It was not a death plan. It was a settlement plan. The prosecutor presses. But you knew that the people being resettled would not have adequate food, adequate shelter, adequate medical care. You knew they would be sent east, beyond German control, into territory with nothing. You knew most of them would die. Meyer shakes his head slowly. I knew that conditions would be difficult. I did not know they would be fatal. I am an academic, not a prophet. I cannot be responsible for every outcome that others created. I provided a framework. Others implemented it. If they implemented it badly, that is not my fault. The distinction matters. Again and again. The distinction matters. The trial lasts 3 weeks. Witnesses testify. Documents are read. Arguments are made. In the end, the judges deliberate for 2 days. Then they announce their verdict. Konrad Meyer is classified as a fellow traveler, not a major offender, not a criminal. Just someone who went along, who participated, who did not resist. The penalty is a fine of 500 Deutschmarks. He is banned from public office for 3 years. He is prohibited from teaching at a university for 3 years. After that, he can resume his career. The courtroom is quiet. Meyer's wife cries with relief. Meyer himself nods, accepting the judgment. He shakes his lawyer's hand. He walks out of the courtroom a free man. In the back of the room, watching, is a man who was not invited to testify. His name is Ivan Petrovich, but he does not use that name anymore. He uses a different name now, a name he took after the war, a name that helps him forget. He is not really Ivan Petrovich. Ivan Petrovich died on a train somewhere east of the Urals, holding his daughter Katya. The man watching the trial is someone else, someone who survived, someone who came back, someone who has spent the last 2 years trying to find the men who planned his death. He found Meyer. He traveled from Russia to Germany. He sat through the trial. He listened to Meyer explain calmly and clearly that he was just an academic, just a planner, just a man who drew maps. He watched Meyer walk free. He does not understand. He does not understand how a man who drew the maps that sent his family to die can walk out of a courtroom with a fine and a 3-year ban from teaching. He does not understand the distinction between planning and doing. He does not understand why the man with the pencil is not also a killer. He tries to approach Meyer after the verdict. Guards stop him. He shouts something in Russian. Meyer does not turn around. Meyer walks away, toward his wife and children, toward his future, toward the life he will rebuild. The man who was once Ivan Petrovich stands in the hallway, watching Meyer disappear. He thinks about Katya. He thinks about Anna. He thinks about Mikhail. He thinks about the train, the darkness, the dying. He thinks about the maps that Meyer drew, the maps that decided his family were surplus, the maps that sent them to their deaths. He does not cry. He has no tears left. He simply stands and watches and wonders if justice exists anywhere in the world. In the years that follow, Meyer rebuilds his life. The 3-year ban ends. He applies for teaching positions. Some universities are hesitant, but others are not. In 1956, he is appointed professor at the Technical University of Hanover. He teaches courses in agricultural planning and land use. His students respect him. His colleagues admire him. He publishes articles. He attends conferences. He is, once again, a successful academic. He never speaks about the General Plan Ost. When asked, he dismisses it as a minor episode, a wartime assignment, something that happened long ago and has no relevance to his current work. He does not mention the 30 million. He does not mention the maps. He does not mention the gray zones. He focuses on the present, on the future, on the positive contributions he can still make. In 1964, he is invited to give a lecture at the University of Berlin, the same university where he taught before the war, the same city where he planned the future of the East. He stands at the lectern in a room full of students and talks about agricultural development in post-war Germany. The students take notes. They do not know who he is. They do not know what he did. They see only a professor, a scholar, a man who knows his subject. After the lecture, a student approaches. He has read something somewhere. He has questions. He asks Meyer about his wartime work. Meyer smiles and shakes his head. "That was a long time ago," he says. "I was a different person then. We all made mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them and move forward." The student nods. He accepts this. He walks away. Meyer packs his notes and leaves the building. He walks through the streets of Berlin, past the rebuilt buildings, past the new shops, past the people who do not know his name. He thinks about the lecture, the students, the future. He does not think about the past. He never thinks about the past. He lives to be 81 years old. He dies in 1973 in his home, surrounded by his family. His obituary in the university newsletter praises his contributions to agricultural science. It mentions his wartime service briefly, in a single sentence. During the war, he served in various planning capacities. It does not mention the General Plan Ost. It does not mention the 30 million. It does not mention the maps. No one protests. No one objects. No one remembers. But somewhere, in an archive in Germany, the documents remain. The General Plan Ost, Meyer's signature, the maps with the gray zones, the population projections, the calorie calculations, the numbers are still there. They wait. They do not forget. They do not forgive. They simply are. And somewhere, in a small village in Russia, an old man sits on a bench outside his house. He is very old now. His name is not Ivan Petrovich, but that is the name he thinks of when he remembers. He thinks about his daughters. He thinks about the train. He thinks about the man in the courtroom, the professor who walked free. He thinks about justice and whether it exists, and what it would look like if it did. He does not have answers. He has only memories. He sits on the bench and watches the sun go down and waits for nothing at all. In Berlin, in the archive, the documents wait. Paper does not blush. Paper does not feel shame. Paper does not die. Paper waits forever. And one day, someone will open the files again and read the words and remember what the professors did with their clean hands and sharp pencils. The old man sits on a bench in a small park in Hanover, Germany. It is a warm afternoon in September 1971. Children play on the grass nearby. Their laughter floats through the air, light and careless. The old man watches them and remembers other children, children who never grew up, children whose laughter stopped long ago in places whose names no one remembers. His name is Konrad Meyer. He is 70 years old. He has been retired from the university for 5 years. He has a comfortable pension, a nice apartment, a wife who still loves him, children who visit on holidays, grandchildren who call him Opa. By any normal measure, he has had a good life, a successful life, a life to be proud of. But lately, he cannot sleep. He lies awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about things he has not thought about in decades. The maps, the numbers, the meetings with Himmler, the documents he signed, the plans he made. He tells himself it was a long time ago. He tells himself he was just doing his job. He tells himself the distinction matters. But the distinction does not help him sleep. He does not know why this is happening now. Maybe it is age. Maybe it is the news, the constant news, the trials that keep happening, the survivors who keep coming forward, the stories that will not die. Maybe it is the letter he received last month, a letter from a man in Russia, a man who claimed to be one of the survivors, a man who said he remembered Meyer's name from the documents, a man who asked a simple question. Do you remember my daughter? She was 7 years old. Her name was Katya. Meyer does not remember Katya. He never knew Katya. He never knew any of them. They were numbers to him, statistics, data points. He did not know they had names, families, lives, dreams. He did not know they were real. But now, in the darkness of his bedroom, they are real. They come to him in dreams. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Faces without bodies. Children without parents. Old people without graves. They do not accuse him. They do not speak. They simply look at him, and he knows what they are asking. Why? He has no answer. He never had an answer. He had a job. He had a plan. He had numbers. He never had an answer to why. In the park, a little girl runs past him, chasing a balloon. She is maybe 5 years old, dark hair, bright eyes. She laughs as she runs. Meyer watches her and thinks of Katya. He does not know Katya. He never knew Katya. But he thinks of her anyway. He thinks of all the Katyas, the millions of Katyas, the children who never got to chase balloons in parks. He stands up slowly. His knees hurt. Everything hurts now. He walks back to his apartment, past the neat houses, the well-tended gardens, the ordinary life he built on top of the ruins. He climbs the stairs. He sits in his favorite chair and looks out the window at the city below. On his desk is a stack of papers. His memoirs. He has been writing them for years, a record of his life, his work, his contributions to agricultural science. He is almost done. The manuscript is nearly complete. But he cannot finish it. He cannot write the last chapter. Because the last chapter would have to explain, and he cannot explain. He does not know how. He picks up a photograph from the desk. It is an old photograph from 1942. He is standing with Himmler and several other SS officers. They are smiling. They are at a conference, reviewing plans, discussing the future. In the photograph, Meyer looks confident, proud, important. He was 41 years old. He was at the height of his career. He was building the future. He puts the photograph down. He looks at his hands. They are old hands now, spotted, wrinkled, shaking slightly. But they are the same hands that held the pencil, the same hands that drew the maps, the same hands that wrote the numbers. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. He thinks about Smolensk. He never went there. He never saw it. He just wrote the number. 15,000. It seemed reasonable at the time. A city of that size could support 15,000 people. The rest would have to go somewhere else. That was the plan. That was all. But now, in the silence of his apartment, he wonders what happened to the other 135,000. Where did they go? How did they die? Did they suffer? Did they cry out for their mothers? Did they think about him, the man who decided they were surplus, as they lay dying in the snow? He does not know. He never wanted to know. He was a planner, not an executor. The distinction matters. Does it? For the first time in 30 years, Meyer allows himself to ask the question. Does the distinction really matter? Is the man who plans a murder less guilty than the man who commits it? Is the man who draws the map less responsible than the man who follows it? Is the man who writes the numbers less accountable than the man who makes the numbers real? He does not know the answer. He has spent his whole life believing that the distinction matters, believing that he was different, special, exempt, believing that academics are not killers, that planners are not murderers, that the men with pencils are not the same as the men with guns. But now, sitting alone in his apartment, surrounded by the comfortable life he built on the foundation of other people's deaths, he is not so sure. He thinks about the letter, the man who wrote it, the man who lost his daughter, the man who asked if Meyer remembered. Meyer does not remember, but he will never forget the question. He will carry it with him to his grave. Do you remember my daughter? She was 7 years old. Her name was Katya. No, he does not remember, but he will dream of her tonight and tomorrow night and every night for the rest of his life. He will dream of a little girl with dark hair and bright eyes, running through the snow, chasing something she will never catch. He will dream of her falling and freezing and calling out for a father who cannot save her. He will dream of her eyes, asking the question he cannot answer. Why? In Moscow in the same year, another old man sits in a small apartment. His name is Dmitri Petrovich, but that is not his real name. He changed it after the war, trying to forget, trying to start over. He is 73 years old. He lives alone. His wife died 10 years ago. His children are gone. He has no grandchildren. He is the man who wrote the letter, the man who asked Meyer about Katya. He has been searching for Meyer for 25 years. He found him finally, through archives, through records, through the patient work of a man who has nothing left but time and memory. He does not know if Meyer received the letter. He does not know if Meyer read it. He does not know if Meyer remembers. But he had to send it. He had to ask the question. He had to make someone somewhere acknowledge that Katya existed, that she was real, that she mattered. He sits by the window and looks out at the Moscow skyline. He thinks about the train, the darkness, the smell, the weight of Katya in his arms as she stopped breathing. He thinks about Anna, who gave everything to keep her sister alive. He thinks about Mikhail, who died coughing blood. He thinks about all of them, the millions, the ones who never had a chance. He does not hate Meyer. He tried to hate him for years, but hate is exhausting. Hate requires energy, and he is very tired. He feels something else now, something colder, something like pity. Pity for a man who spent his whole life believing that planning is different from doing, that maps are different from murders, that the distinction matters. He knows the truth now, the truth he learned on the train, in the camp, in the long years of surviving when surviving seemed impossible. The truth is that there is no distinction. The planner and the executor are the same. The map and the murder are the same. The pencil and the gun are the same. They all lead to the same place. They all end in the same darkness. He does not expect Meyer to answer the letter. He does not expect justice. He does not expect anything. He just wanted someone to know, someone to remember, someone to carry the weight for a little while. He sits by the window and watches the sun go down. He thinks about Katya. He will always think about Katya. She is with him always, the ghost of a 7-year-old girl with her mother's eyes, asking the question that has no answer. Why? In 1973, Konrad Meyer dies. His heart gives out in his sleep. He is found by his wife in the morning, peaceful, quiet, his face relaxed. The obituary in the university newsletter praises his contributions to agricultural science. It mentions his wartime service briefly, in a single sentence. It does not mention the General Plan Ost. It does not mention the 30 million. It does not mention Katya. At the funeral, his children speak about what a good father he was. His colleagues speak about what a brilliant scholar he was. His grandchildren cry because they are told to cry. No one mentions the past. No one mentions the war. No one mentions the documents that bear his name. He is buried in a quiet cemetery in Hanover. The headstone is simple. His name, his dates, No epitaph, no message, just a man who lived and died, like millions of others. In Moscow, Dmitry Petrovich reads about the death in a newspaper. A small item, buried deep, barely noticeable. He reads it 3 times. Then he folds the newspaper and places it on the table. He feels nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no closure. Just the same emptiness he has felt for 30 years. Meyer is dead, but Katya is still dead. Anna is still dead. Mikhail is still dead. The millions are still dead. Death does not cancel death. It only adds to it. He sits by the window and looks out at the sky. He thinks about the last time he saw Katya alive. She was sitting on his lap, eating a piece of bread, looking up at him with those eyes. She did not understand what was happening. She did not understand why they were on a train, why she was hungry, why everything was so cold and dark and scary. She just trusted him to make it better. He could not make it better. He could not save her. He could not do anything except hold her while she died. He closes his eyes. He is very tired. He has been tired for a very long time. In the archive in Berlin, the documents wait. The General Plan Ost Meyer's signature, the maps with the gray zones, the population projections, the calorie calculations, the numbers, 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. They are just paper now, just ink on paper. They have no power anymore. They cannot kill anyone. They cannot plan anyone's death. They are just relics, artifacts, evidence of what happened. But they wait. They wait for someone to open them, to read them, to remember. They wait for the questions that have no answers. They wait for the Katyas who will never come home. Paper does not die. Paper does not forget. Paper waits forever. And somewhere, in the space between the numbers, in the silence between the words, the dead wait too. They wait for justice. They wait for acknowledgement. They wait for someone to say their names. But the names are gone. Lost in the trains, in the camps, in the frozen ground. Only the numbers remain. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. The numbers are all that is left. The numbers and the questions. Why? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. It drifts through the archives, through the cemeteries, through the memories of the few who still remember. It settles on the headstones, on the documents, on the photographs of children who never grew up. Why? There is no answer. There never was. There is only the question, and the silence, and the dead who wait forever for someone to remember their names. The year is 2023. The place is the German Federal Archives in Berlin-Lichterfelde. A young historian named Dr. Anna Weber sits at a long wooden table, surrounded by boxes of documents. She is 34 years old. She has been studying the General Plan Ost for 5 years. She knows the documents better than anyone alive. Before her, on the table, is the original 1942 revision. The same document that Captain Thompson found in Oberfuhrer Schmidt's safe 77 years ago. The pages are yellowed now, fragile, carefully preserved in protective sleeves. But the words are still clear. The maps are still sharp. The numbers are still there. 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. Anna reads them again, though she has read them 100 times. She tries to imagine the man who wrote them. Konrad Meyer, professor, academic, planner. She has read his personal papers too, the ones donated to the archive by his family after his death. Letters to his wife, notes from his lectures, photographs of his children, a draft of his unfinished memoirs. In one letter written in 1943, Meyer tells his wife about a conference he attended. He mentions the excellent organization and the productive discussions. He does not mention what was discussed. He does not mention the maps or the numbers or the gray zones. He writes about the weather, about a meal he enjoyed, about his hope to be home soon. It is a normal letter from a husband to a wife. It could have been written by anyone. Anna puts the letter down. She thinks about the contrast. The man who wrote loving letters to his family also wrote the plan that would have killed 30 million people. The man who worried about his children's education also worried about the optimal density of German settlement in Ukraine. The man who enjoyed good meals also calculated how many calories were needed to let millions starve. How does a person hold both of these things? How does a mind contain love and murder in the same space? How does a man go home at night and kiss his children good night after spending the day planning the deaths of other people's children? She does not know. She has been asking these questions for 5 years, and she still does not know. Outside the archive, the world goes on. Tourists take pictures of the Brandenburg Gate. School children learn about the war in their history classes. Politicians give speeches about remembrance and responsibility. The usual things. The necessary things. The things that never seem quite enough. Anna closes the document and returns it to its box. She has work to do. She is writing a book about the planners, the academics, the men with clean hands and sharp pencils. She wants the world to know their names. She wants the world to understand that murder does not always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a tweed jacket. Sometimes it carries a briefcase. Sometimes it has a PhD. She walks through the archive, past row after row of boxes, past the accumulated evidence of a century of German history. Good and evil side by side, filed and catalogued and waiting to be discovered. She thinks about all the documents she will never read, all the stories she will never know, all the names that will remain forgotten. In the lobby, she stops at a small exhibit. The archive occasionally displays documents for the public. Today's exhibit is about the post-war trials, photographs of defendants, copies of verdicts, a display case containing the judgment in Konrad Meyer's denazification trial. Anna reads it again, though she knows it by heart. Classified as a fellow traveler, fined 500 Deutschmarks, banned from public office for 3 years. She thinks about the woman from the train station, the one who fought back, the one who lost her children. She thinks about Ivan Petrovich, sitting in the courtroom, watching Meyer walk free. She thinks about all the survivors who never got to see justice done. A group of school children passes through the exhibit. They are maybe 15 years old on a field trip, listening to their teacher explain the trials. They look bored. They look at their phones. They do not understand that the documents in these cases are not history. They are warnings. Anna watches them for a moment. She wants to grab them, shake them, make them understand. These documents are not old news. These documents are blueprints. Blueprints for murder. Blueprints that could be used again. Blueprints that are being used again, in different places with different names by different people who also believe they are just doing their jobs. She does not grab them. She does not shake them. She walks past them and out into the Berlin afternoon. The city is beautiful in September. The trees are just beginning to turn. People sit at outdoor cafes, drinking coffee, reading newspapers. Life goes on. It always goes on. That is the horror and the miracle. Anna walks to a small park not far from the archive. She sits on a bench and watches the people pass, couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers, old men feeding pigeons. Ordinary life, happening in a city that was once the heart of the greatest murder machine the world has ever seen. She thinks about Meyer's grandchildren. They would be old now, if they are still alive. They probably never knew what their grandfather did. They probably never read the documents. They probably remember him as Opa, the nice old man who told stories and gave presents at Christmas. They probably have no idea that their Opa planned the deaths of 30 million people. Is that their fault? No. Is it anyone's fault? She does not know. She thinks about Ivan Petrovich. He would be long dead now. Over 100 years old, if he lived at all. She wonders if he ever found peace. She wonders if he ever stopped seeing Katya's face. She wonders if he ever stopped asking why. Probably not. Some questions have no answers. Some wounds never heal. Some ghosts never rest. She thinks about Captain Thompson. He died in 1989, an old man in Chicago. His family donated his papers to an American archive. Among them was a copy of the General Plan Ost, the one he found in Schmidt's safe, along with his personal notes. In his last letter, written a few weeks before his death, Thompson wrote, "I have spent my whole life trying to understand how men like Meyer could do what they did. I have never succeeded. I have only learned that the capacity for evil is not limited to monsters. It lives in ordinary people. It lives in professors and farmers and bankers and clerks. It lives in all of us. The only question is whether we recognize it and fight it, or whether we pretend it isn't there." Anna pulls out her notebook and writes down Thompson's words. She will use them in her book. They are the closest thing to an answer she has found. The sun begins to set. The park empties. The cafes close. The city prepares for evening. Anna stays on the bench watching the light change, thinking about the dead. 30 million. It is just a number. It is too big to feel. But behind that number are faces. Ivan's face, Anna's face, Mikhail's face, Katya's face. Millions of faces, each one as real as the faces in the park today. Each one with a name, a story, a life that mattered to someone. She thinks about Katya, 7 years old, died on a train, in her father's arms, on the way to a place that was never meant to be a home. She thinks about what Katya might have become if she had lived. A teacher, a doctor, a mother, a grandmother, a woman sitting on a bench somewhere, watching the sunset, thinking about her own children. All of that erased, not by a bullet, not by a bomb, by a plan, by a calculation, by a number in a column, by a man with a pencil who never saw her face. Anna stands up. It is getting dark. She needs to go home. She has work tomorrow. More documents, more names, more stories. The work never ends. That is the point. The work never ends because the dead cannot speak for themselves. Someone has to speak for them. She walks back through the city, past the lights coming on in the windows, past the families sitting down to dinner, past the ordinary life that continues despite everything. She thinks about Meyer's question. The distinction matters. Does it? She has her answer now. After 5 years of research, after thousands of pages of documents, after all the hours of thinking and writing and wondering, she has her answer. The distinction does not matter. The planner and the executor are the same. The map and the murder are the same. The pencil and the gun are the same. They are all tools of the same machine. They are all parts of the same evil. They all lead to the same place. What matters is not the distinction. What matters is the recognition. What matters is the willingness to see. What matters is the choice to remember. Meyer chose not to see. He chose to believe that planning was different from doing. He chose to hide behind his maps and his numbers and his academic credentials. He chose to forget. And because he forgot, he was able to live a long, comfortable life, surrounded by people who loved him, never once facing the consequences of what he had done. But the dead did not forget. The dead cannot forget. The dead are dead because of what he did. They have no choice but to remember. Anna stops at a corner and looks up at the sky. The first stars are appearing. She thinks about all the souls that have left this world, all the lives that ended too soon, all the stories that were never told. She thinks about Katya, somewhere out there, in the darkness, asking the question that has no answer. Why? She does not know. She will never know. But she knows this. The question must be asked. It must be asked again and again, generation after generation, until the answer comes, or until there is no one left to ask. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is forgetting. The alternative is letting the planners win. The alternative is pretending that 30 million deaths are just a number, just a statistic, just something that happened a long time ago and has nothing to do with us. The alternative is becoming Meyer. Anna walks on. She has work to do. The dead are waiting. In the archive, the documents wait. The General Plan Ost. Meyer's signature, the maps with the gray zones, the population projections, the calorie calculations, the numbers, 30 million, 45 million, 15,000 for Smolensk. They are just paper. But paper carries memory. Paper carries truth. Paper carries the evidence of what humans can do to other humans when they convince themselves that the distinction matters. And somewhere, in the space between the words, in the silence between the numbers, the dead wait too. They wait for someone to remember their names. They wait for someone to tell their stories. They wait for someone to ask the question and refuse to stop asking until there is an answer. There is no answer, there never was. But the asking matters. The remembering matters. The telling matters. Because if we stop asking, if we stop remembering, if we stop telling, then Meyer wins. Then all the Meyers win. Then the planners and the calculators and the men with clean hands and sharp pencils win. Then the distinction matters, and we become just like them. Anna reaches her apartment. She climbs the stairs. She opens the door. She sits at her desk and turns on the light. Before her is the manuscript of her book. Hundreds of pages, years of work, the story of the planners, the academics, the men who killed with pencils. She picks up her pen and writes the final words. The dead do not forget. They cannot forget. They are dead because someone decided they were surplus. They are dead because someone drew a line on a map. They are dead because someone calculated that 30 million was an acceptable cost. We are the living. We have a choice. We can forget and become like them, or we can remember and become something else. Remember Katya. Remember Anna. Remember Mikhail. Remember Ivan. Remember all the names that were never recorded, all the faces that were never photographed, all the stories that were never told. Remember them, and then ask yourself, what would you have done? Would you have drawn the maps? Would you have calculated the numbers? Would you have convinced yourself that the distinction matters? The answer is not comfortable. The answer is not easy. But the question must be asked. It must be asked forever. For the dead are waiting, and they will not wait forever. Anna sets down her pen. Outside the city is quiet. The stars are bright. Somewhere a child laughs in her sleep. Somewhere an old man dreams of a train. Somewhere in the archive, the documents wait. The dead wait too. They will always wait. They are patient. They have all the time in the world. We are the ones who are running out of time. We are the ones who must choose. We are the ones who must remember. The question hangs in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. Why? There is no answer. There never was. But the question remains. It will always remain. It is the only thing we have. The question and the memory. The memory and the dead. The dead and the question. Forever.